The International Energy Agency says African countries will need to quadruple their rate of investment in their power sectors for the next 2 decades to bring reliable electricity to all Africans. According to the IEA, if African countries continue on their policy trajectory, 530 million Africans will still lack electricity in 2030. And so bringing reliable electricity to all Africans will require annual investment of around $120 billion. The agency advises that taking advantage of technological advances and optimizing natural resources could help Africa's economy grow fourfold by 2040 while requiring just 50% more energy. And still talking about electricity, and South Africans are not finding it easy at all. Earlier today, we spoke to our South African correspondent, Cartel Legodi, on the situation with power. And here is what he has to say.
South Africa's power utility Eskom moved to implement Stage 2 load shedding on Thursday night, going into Friday, shaving off 2,000 megawatts from the national grid. Although this was lifted in the early hours of Friday, the power utility has considered that the system remains vulnerable. The move to implement Stage 2 load shedding has been attributed to the loss of 3 generation units, pushing Eskom's emergency reserve capacity to critical levels. Eskom added that the risk of power cuts on Friday are high as the system remains severely constrained, warning consumers that load shedding on Friday cannot be ruled out. South Africa's rand was weaker early on Friday, this following a nationwide electricity blackout overnight by embattled power utility Eskom. The rand had rallied on Thursday to its firmest since October 30th's medium budget by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni. This was mainly on the back of renewed hopes of a US-China trade deal that saw the country's currency shrug off a dip in business confidence and a contraction in manufacturing. The rand is currently trading at 14.89 to the US dollar, 19.01 to the British pound, and 16.38 to the euro. Economists say although the rand can sometimes perform well when growth is weak as imports demand softens, history shows us that this is not the case when load shedding hits or rotational power cuts take place. South Africa continues to make headway in securing much-needed investments to boost the country's ailing economy. The country held its second investment conference at the Sandton Convention Center this week, with the country securing 200 billion rand on new investment pledges. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says his administration is on track to lure new investment within 5 years, with more than $16 billion already committed and many more projects in the pipeline. This is, of course, good news in the streets, looking at the economy that is stagnant, an unemployment rate that is stuck at about 30%, and a country that is in danger of losing its sole investment-grade credit rating as the state's finances continue to deteriorate. On a lighter note, good news though for motorists and consumers, with the petrol price going down by R1.84 a litre this festive season. The Department of Energy has confirmed that the petrol price for December will be subject to a monster decrease and one of the biggest recorded in South African history. It's taken 8 months for the tide to turn, but the festive season is bearing gifts for motorists, a welcome relief as a petrol increase tend to have an effect on food prices and lead to the rise in transport fares for those that rely on public transport. Now, taking a look at the country's economic outlook going into a new week, South Africa's economic activity in the fourth quarter appears bleak following an unenthusiastic mid-term policy statement by Finance Minister in October. This has led to Moody's, which is the only major rating agency that has not downgraded South Africa to sub-investment grade, also known as junk, reviewing the country's outlook to negative. Moody's now expects South Africa's economy to grow by 0.7% in 2019 from its forecast of 1% in June, which was also revised down from earlier expectations of 1.3%. The country's outlook going into the second week of November will see steady growth, with the rand remaining vulnerable against the world's major currencies. This due to uncertainty of rolling power cuts by South Africa's power utility Eskom. Well,
that was our South African correspondent, Kat Legodi. Well, the reopening of a plastic factory in the Libyan oil port of Ras Nanof has provided a rare boost to an economy ravaged by war and political divisions. Libya is almost entirely dependent on oil revenues, and the National Oil Corporation has struggled to keep crude production stable. Output recovered to around 1.3 million barrels per day as of last month, but the picture beyond oil and gas is bleak.
As security deteriorated during the NATO-backed uprising against Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, foreign companies left the country, abandoning hundreds of unfinished or stalled projects. The polyethylene factory in Ras Lanuf, operated by Ras Lanuf Oil and Gas Processing Company, an NOC subsidiary, was shut down for more than 8 years because of poor security. It reopened last month with an initial production capacity of 80,000 tons a year, set to increase to 160,000 tons.
After the events of February 17, 2011, the Ras Lanuf plant was shut down completely. There was a trial to operate the polyethylene factory in 2013 under the same conditions. The oil component was imported from abroad and was operated for a period of time. But it was useless at the time because there was no clear action plan on when the rest of the factories will work.
Ras Lanuf is in Libya's oil crescent, an arc of land stretching south from the Mediterranean coast, where oil fields and ports are concentrated. Ras Lanuf port was blockaded for years, and the surrounding area has been repeatedly caught up in fighting between rival Libyan factions and attacks by Islamic State militants that destroyed some of its oil storage tanks. In June, troops entered the port and commandeered a building and mills for oil workers.
The security situation was one reason. Another reason was the fact that the region was no longer safe for industrialists and contractors to manage the work. There was no strong will to operate the plant at the time. As part of a previous study in 2016-2017 to manage some of the simple maintenance operations, but it was below average compared to how it's operated now. We started working since August 15, 2018 to prepare a plan done by the planning department.
On a recent day, however, uniformed workers have been seen back at their posts in the plastic factory as machines rumbled in the background. Haftar's offensive has cast new doubt on Libya's unity. He controls most oil fields and facilities, but revenue is still challenged through the NOC and centered back in Tripoli, home to an internationally recognized government that Haftar opposes.
And with that, we draw the curtain on today's edition of the program and, of course, for the week. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimezi Uwagu.